Hello. Thank you for coming, everybody. Welcome to the Women and Children's First virtual event with Denny, Bryce, and Nancy. Oh, my goodness, just lost my screen. Nancy Johnson. So, thank you so much for joining us today. Um, my name is Ariel. I am a bookseller with Women and Children First. And I wanted to go ahead and start us off in the way that we usually start all of our events, whether they are virtual or in person, and that's with a land acknowledgement. So please join me in acknowledging that the land which the bookstore stands is the occupied, unceded territory of the Peoria, Potawatomi, Miami, Sioux people. We encourage you to learn more about the land acknowledgements and about the rightful owners of the land where you are viewing tonight's event. And if you want to know a little bit more about the Indigenous people working in Chicago, I highly recommend checking out Chi Nations Youth Council, which is also located on the north side of Chicago, as our bookstore is. We have another event coming up tomorrow, which is a poetry event, same time, same place. You can definitely check it out on our Crowdcast. If you have any questions, at the bottom of the screen, there is a button that says ask a question, and you can put your questions in there, and Nancy is going to bring them up for us later on in the event. If you would like to get the book and you don't already have it, which I'm sure afterward you will probably want either one, The Kindest Lie or Wild Women and the Blues, hopefully both, maybe both, you can click the button right underneath our pictures as well that says buy the book, and that will order the book from our store. You can also come into the store because we are open now. We've been open since March 11th. We take in about 6 people at a time just for COVID precautions. We are open Tuesday through Sunday from noon to 6. And I think that is it for me today. I'm going to hand it over to our incredible authors, these two beautiful Black women that I get to sit with today, which I talked earlier about the fact that we are all Black and wearing glasses. I'm super excited about that. I don't know. I just love Black women with glasses because we are just the best. And so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Ariel. And thank you to Women and Children First for hosting us. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I am Nancy Johnson, and I'm the author of the debut novel, The Kindest Lie, which released February 2nd, story of race, class, and family at the dawn of the Obama era. And I have to say that the best part, or one of the best parts of this journey, oh, thank you so much, Denny, for holding that up. One of the best parts about this journey to publication and being a new author is getting to know and go on this journey with other debut authors who are incredible. And one of my tightest buddies on this journey is Denny S. Bryce. And I've learned over the years never to miss the S. You know, she's a brand expert, and so I know all about brand. And yeah, we want to make sure we get that right. Denny S. Bryce. And I have been excited about her book, Wild Women and the Blues, ever since Denny, you shared a copy of this book with me, and you asked me to give you some feedback. And so it is just wonderful. It's immersive. It's got everything you would want in a book. I made a list of some of the things like the history. It's got love, criminal enterprise, family, secrets. I mean, it's got everything, and it just takes you to Chicago in the jazz age. And so I want to tell you a little bit about our author first, Denny S. Bryce, a public relations professional. She spent more than 20 years running her own marketing and public relations firm. A graduate of Barrett College at DePaul University, she was a professional dancer, part-time singer, and she says bad actress. I don't know if bad means bad or bad.
not the latter.
In college, she minored in history, but her love of 20th century American history, 19th century British history, and Africa, she credits to her maternal grandmother, Ella Elizabeth Joseph, who immigrated from Montego Bay, Jamaica to New York City in 1923, and to her father, Lester Collingwood, born and raised in Bermuda, a British overseas territory, who came to America to attend Wilberforce University in the 1950s. Denny also writes book reviews for NPR Books and entertainment articles for Frolic Media. She recently relocated from Northern Virginia to Savannah, Georgia. So an incredible bio. Welcome, Denny.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate being here. Thank you to the bookstore in Chicago, my home base for many, many years. I no longer live there, but believe me, I spent some valuable days of my youth and beyond in the streets of Chicago. So I think it's almost natural that my debut novel, is set in Chicago. And so that's, what I can say about that novel is, let me just talk about it for a minute.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about being you're not from Chicago, but it's like Chicago's your adopted hometown.
Oh, definitely.
When you come through, you always, contact me. We try to get together, and I love that,
Yeah.
Special.
A lot of things happen, and it's a great city. It's one of my favorite cities. I've had actually the pleasure of living in I'm a city person. Savannah's probably going to be the smallest place I've ever lived in terms of population. But let's talk about Wild Women.
Yeah, let's talk about Wild Women in the Blues. Tell them about the book, for those who haven't read it.
Yes. Well, it's a historical fiction, but it's told in a dual timeline. And that dual timeline means that part of the book takes place in 1925 Chicago, and part of the book takes place in 2015. The 1925 storyline really focuses on a young woman by the name of Honoree Dalcour. She's 19 years old. She's a chorus girl. She's ambitious. She wants to move on up from the speakeasy where she's dancing, which is a little, it's a little ratty speakeasy, to State Street and the Dreamland Café, which actually was on the corner of State and I think 32nd Street, if my memory is correct, back in the 1920s. Okay. And part of her mission is to really live that star life. Now, in 2015, we have a young man by the name of Sawyer Hayes. He is grieving. He's suffered a great loss. He's trying his best to hang on to or find himself. So he decides to get one thing done. And it so happens that one thing he wants to get done is to finish his grad school thesis, which is he's a film student, so a documentary. But before he goes on this quest, he finds a box in his grandmother's attic, and in that box are a reel of film and some photos. And they're old photos, and on the back there's a name and some information. So he decides to follow up on that name because that woman's name is Honoree Dalcour, and she's at a senior living facility in Chicago, in Bronzeville, and she's 110 years old.
Wow, what a story. So what inspired you to write this particular story?
Well, I like to say that I have layers of inspiration for this story because I think I've always been meant to write historical fiction. Dating back to, and you mentioned my grandmother in my bio, she came to this country in 1923, but what she did, it was almost like she continued to live in the past and in the present at the same time. The house was full of old photographs, a sewing machine that you had to use your feet, both feet, to operate. So it was a Singer sewing machine from the 1920s. There was the stand-up piano in the sunroom. I mean, it was just like back and forth through time. And I'd ask her a lot of questions. I was just a little kid. And it's like, why are you having that? What's that funny car that you're standing next to? Or what's this, that, or the other? So it was her and her joy of the 1920s that I sort of, picked up on. And then I was a professional dancer for a while there in New York City. And as with most professional dancers, I waited tables. So one of the places that I waited tables was owned by a man by the name of Barney Josephson. His name might be familiar to some historians because he owned Cafe Society, which is where Billie Holiday sang Strange Fruit back in the 30s, I believe. Not sure of the time. But one of the headliners during the time I was working there was a woman by the name of Alberta Hunter, who was having her next career, if you will, in her 80s. And she had been a blues singer on the same level of popularity and demand, if you will, as Bessie Smith in the 20s. So meeting her, my job was to bring her tea every night. And even though I wasn't connecting to this icon that I was interacting with, because I was like dancer girl and,
Sure.
and, my mind's all over the place during these days. But we connected on Chicago because both of us were, Chicagoans out of place in New York City. So I think that those two people were definitely a part of my love of the history and, of course, Chicago. And then there's another woman named Alice Barker that some of you who were on Facebook a couple of years ago might recall. She was an older woman, and a young man came to her with a film clip of her dancing in the 1930s or 40s, and she was in her 90s. And so that got my what if train running.
Your wheels turning. Yeah. And you have such an interesting, fascinating, and storied background too, the dancing and all of that. We have comments, Janet, and the comments and saying that she loved that you danced professionally, and what a great experience that must have been. So that's a big part of your story. So I want to talk a little bit about Honoree, who is the main character in the story. She's the daughter of a sharecropper, and she's an ambitious chorus girl. So you're an interesting character. What's your connection to her? And tell us a little bit how you crafted that.
I crafted her. I have been asked that question before, and she is not exactly me.
Okay. A little bit of you, I think.
There's a taste, but she is someone of her time. I really wanted to. She's independent. She's struggled. She's had some things happen that have not been, that have been very distasteful. But she has that spirit of conquer what's around her. That desire to not be a victim of her environment, of the men she meets, of her circumstances. She is very much wanting to have what she wants. She's also young. She's 19. So sometimes her decisions and her process adds conflict and some moments in the story, but I wanted that reality of someone in 1925, and not someone, an African-American chorus girl in Bronzeville, in the Black Belt, as it was called, and facing the challenges of being on your own and still making sure you got done what you needed to get done.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of stories we need. And we're going to talk a little bit later about race and, as a theme in the book, but I'm thinking about her in the Black Belt and how you talk about her owning, in a way, it's like she's owning her space.
Yes.
The way I think of her.
Exactly. I talk about my stories may not have my main characters writing the world, at least not in Wild Women in the Blues. The focus is on conquering the space that they live in. Their challenges, their ambitions, who they are wrapped up into the world that they're in. They recognize to a certain level that they're not going to be able to go out there and change issues of race and segregation and all of these other things. But there's also something about Chicago during that time period that is uplifting, because The city had banks. I mean, this part of Chicago had a vibrant business community. And the people, yes, policy gambling was, the way that a lot of money was made. But one of the stories that I love hearing about has to do with Al Capone being kept out of the South Side of Chicago, out of the Black Belt, because that's not where he could come and mess with the gambling operation, because the policy kings, as they were called, had control of that, and they were African Americans.
See, I love that we had our own thing, even if it was in the criminal enterprise. You know what I mean? Yeah, we had our own space and did our own thing. And I think these are the untold stories that so many people don't know about, even within the Black community, that these are stories that we are not always familiar with. And, for people who don't know, Denny and I talk on the phone a lot, like I say once every week or two, we talk. And whenever we get on the phone, you always you light up when you talk about the research that you do into your book. And, my second novel that I'm working on, People of Means, is my first foray into historical fiction. And you often are giving me tips because, you've already now produced historical fiction, and that's the world that you play in. So tell me a little bit about the research that went into Wild Women in the Blues.
Well, I actually am going to reach for some samples here because I'm going to start with some books. It's layered.
Show and tell.
Show and tell, I'm all for it. It's multi-layered. I used everything from music to working with archivists at the Harold Washington Library in Chicago to talking to a map person at the Library of Congress, spending hours studying maps from the 1920s of the city. But also there's a lot of reading because I do have guest appearances in my story from historical figures that you might be familiar with. Louis Armstrong, Oscar Micheaux, the legendary African-American filmmaker of race films, Lil Hardin Armstrong, who is a fabulous character, just a marvelous woman that I feel she needs to have a whole book written about her. But some of the books that I use, this is Louis Armstrong, Master of Modernism. He had such a brilliant career. And yes, there were some moments later in his career that sort of put a different hue on who he was politically. But in the early stages of his career, as he left New Orleans and when Storyville closed down at the turn of the century and he arrives in Chicago, he was the king. And so, in fact, Lil Hardin Armstrong, they married, I think, in 24 or 25, had him, she created the billboard at the Dreamland Café that said, and she insisted it say this, the greatest trumpet player in the world. So she was his Bengali in a way. Oscar Micheaux, another resource, books. This one, one thing that I always believe, even when you're writing fantasy or whatever, you want to understand the economics of a time period and a city. This book was fabulous for providing me with that. It's called Chicago's New Negro by Devarian L. Baldwin. There's several other books of that nature. This one, however, written in 1966, and the author interviewed some of the jazz legends, now jazz legends, that back then they were older African-American men and women talking about their careers in their own words. So it's called The Story of Jazz is Told by the Men Who Made It. Hear me talking to ya. So research is a critical part because I'm not a historian. So this stuff, I got to look it up just like everybody else. And then I have to massage it into story.
Yeah. So one thing, this gets to some of the questions I ask you sometimes just when we're on the phone. I love it when authors like you drop some of these historical figures, these figures who are now famous to us, and you drop them into the narrative, like a Louis Armstrong. Is that okay? I mean, for there are a lot of writers who are here with us watching. Is that all right to drop them in and have them actually be speaking and be in places that you don't really have proof that they were there because you've now fictionalized this entire world? How does that work with historical figures?
It's
real.
There are some rules. For example, if I know where and when Louis Armstrong and Lil Hardin were married, so I had them as a couple, and I know what block they lived on. One of the things about the Chicago Defender, when they were doing a news story back in the day, they always put the address of where people.
That will not play today, right?
Right? It would just never work. But they'll put their address and phone number and all of that sort of stuff. It was hysterical. So and that's where the maps come in. So I can't legitimately put Louis Armstrong and Lil Hardin in Chicago if they weren't there. Okay. So that's part of it. They were there and they were married during the time period that I have them married and were there a couple. Yeah. Also, the other thing is that at the Dreamland Café, in the news articles in the Chicago Defender archives, I found the advertisement for the opening night of the band that Lil Armstrong. So you take the facts and you use the facts to enhance your story and give your story more breadth. And that's probably the difference between historical fiction, where you have fictional characters, and historical fiction that is called biographical fiction, where you are telling the story of another person's life that can be documented.
Okay. Now, Della Lovett says you have Harry Houdini too, Denny.
I think I mentioned Houdini. Okay. Well, I also have a character whose nickname is Houdini in the book.
Okay. Yes. Now,
so I can't give away any more than that.
Can't give away. Yeah. We can't say more. Okay. I want to talk about. We've shown this beautiful book. But the thing that so many people have fallen in love with has been this beautiful cover. I mean, just the detail, the intricacy of it. Anissa is saying gorgeous cover. That's what everybody says. It just takes your breath away. Tell us about the making of the cover of Wild Women in the Blues and how much of an influence did you have on this work of art?
Well, I will say that this cover, the final cover, is the version of the cover that I saw. And the fourth. And I think that I won't necessarily call it a collaboration because your publisher has a lot of goals that they are in a marketing and PR world. They know what kind of space they're going to have on the shelf, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It gets very difficult. But I wanted to emphasize that this book needed to have the feel of the time without, I didn't want an illustration, okay? Yeah. And I didn't want to see a full face. That's just personally me. I would rather not do that. When this particular piece of art was sent to me, I was like, okay, we're here. Everything is beautiful. It is fabulous.
And that's rare for that to happen so early.
Say it again. I'm sorry, because I lost some of it.
That's rare when you first see a cover is presented to you to be like, oh my God, I'm in love.
Well, they nailed it. And they nailed it because now green is not my favorite color. I'm a brighter color person. I like orange. I like yellow. I like, bright colors. But that wasn't the point of this cover. What, for me, it was, she had a dancer's stance. The way she held her shoulder, the angle of her head, the length of her neck, and then the attitude of the way she looks down means that she has something on her mind. And to be able to communicate all of that with that kind of emphasis so quickly in a very competitive marketplace, by the way, because people are during a pandemic in particular, they are looking at a little dot on their computer screen, and that's the cover that you want folks to go, oh, let me look at this again and let me see what the story is. Because, that's part of the marketing mix, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful, and it is great when a cover can be more than just an image, a beautiful image, and that it can help tell the story of
Yes.
the character. Because I know, even in The Kindest Lie, with my cover, I was very intent upon the way my character's head was held, just like you were talking about, because at first the character, her head on the cover was kind of bent a little bit. I'm like, no, I don't want bowed. Like, this is a proud Black woman. I need her head held high. And it just said something to me and so it's interesting that you also talked about the vision of her.
It's subliminal. And then it's, in both cases, we're talking about powerful poses that, and some of the people who see this cover, they're attracted to the dress that, is beautiful, the necklace, they love the jewelry in her hair. All of those things are absolutely things that should be attracting a potential reader. But for the author, I can see the different details that I know that, or I hope that when the reader finishes the book, they're like, oh, I understand this cover 10 times better now because of the story I just read.
Exactly. And Kat in the comments says, yes, I stopped scrolling on Twitter when this came up in my feed and found out about the book from that. And so she's so glad she did. So yeah, your cover is working. It's doing its job. Yay. Yay. Well, now we're at the portion. Do you have something you would like to share with us, to read to us, a brief excerpt?
I can certainly read a brief excerpt.
Very brief, yes.
Hopefully,
a flavor and hearing Denny S. Bryce reading from her masterpiece.
You're darling. I appreciate that. Let me set it up a little bit first. I'm going to read the opening pages, just a couple of pages. And this would be in, as I go into it, this is the 2015 storyline. So let me just dive in. Wild Women in the Blues, Chapter 1, Sawyer, Friday, June 5th, 2015, Chicago. On the 5th floor of the Bronzeville Senior Living Facility, I stand outside the smallest room in the world, doing my best to ignore the dropped ceiling and square linoleum tiles, stoking my claustrophobia. No windows, no air, no natural light, just stark white walls out of focus like cheesecloth over a camera lens. The old woman in the bed adds to my anxiety, as does the fact that I'm almost out of cash. But nothing will defeat me, not this go-round, not with the help of the old lady in the bed, Honoree Dalcour, my last great hope. The backpack digs into my shoulder. I check the time on my cell phone. 8 hours until my connecting flight to Paris. 6 hours, fewer if I take a shuttle back to O'Hare, to coax the 110-year-old woman in the bed, who could die at any second or who could be dead now, into telling me a story to fix my life, or more likely help me finish my film project. You see, I'm a graduate student chasing a doctorate in media studies. My documentary thesis focuses on the legendary Black filmmaker Oscar Micheaux in 1925. The project, however, has a gaping hole smack in the middle, a hole I haven't thought about in over a year, not since my sister Azizi was killed in a car crash with me behind the wheel. 15 months and a lot of tequila later, I need something normal to aspire to, something ordinary and reasonable, like finishing the damn film. God knows, something other than talking to my sister's ghost, a conversation that unquestionably doesn't constitute normal, ordinary, or reasonable. How long are you planning to stand in the doorway? A young woman in navy blue scrubs pushing a medicine cart stops next to me. If you want to talk to Miss Honoree, you should go inside. Her no-nonsense style makes me wonder, does she sense my fear of small spaces, which annoys her, or does she merely want me out of her way? Excuse me. My version of indignant is a pitch too high for a man with my usually deep baritone. She tilts her head and frowns. I said, if you have something to say, you should stand next to her bed. Then you're not some faceless stranger quizzing her from the other side of the room. I can tell she doesn't like me. She's looking at me as if I was a wad of gum on the bottom of her shoe. I'm giving her a few minutes to wake up, I explain. Blue Scrubs folds her arms over her stomach as her large brown eyes casually damn me to hell. This erases any hope of our having a future together.
Very nice, very nice. It's a really nice way to set the story up. And we'll go from there. So, and you're getting applause from the audience.
In a while.
You know, it's kind of fun sometimes to revisit our work, you know, it took us, because we wrote the books so long ago. And so now it's like we're coming back to it again, and we're experiencing the books again as our readers come to the page.
Absolutely. And that's so exciting. And in fact, I was speaking to a friend earlier today, and we were talking about characters and what the takeaway, what especially in my story and in yours, you have generations of people and how the reader is connecting to those people. And does that add, I have an elder, a senior woman in her 100s. I have a 19-year-old. In the story, I have 40-year-olds. And so it's a multi-generational world. And I think that the readers have an opportunity to connect differently with the different characters.
I think that's so true. And that speaks to what we're going to talk about now is both of our books and how they, we have some recurring themes, some similarities, some synergy. And I think just the intergenerational piece that you just talked about, and I have that too in The Kindest Lie. I have two grandmothers. I have the grandmother of my main character, Ruth, who's a 78-year-old woman, and then even her late husband, even though he's not in the picture, he's still there. And it's so interesting that I've had readers comment about that generation because he worked at the auto plant all of his life until he died. And he would wear the baseball cap with the name of the plant, even when he wasn't at work, And some of my discussions were like, would we walk around with our company's, logo sporting that on the weekends? Like, yes, but back then it's like, he was a company man, you know what I mean? Back in the day. And that's, something that's kind of long gone now. But yeah, so I've got him, and then I've got, people in their 20s and 30s, and I even have children who are 11 years old. And so it's interesting to see the range of perspectives and kind of where we've come from in terms of race. I've got the grandmother in my book talking about the Great Migration, witnessing something really horrific before she left the South and moved to Indiana. And so we're getting all of that history in our stories. So go ahead. Did you want to say something on that?
Wonderful about getting that history into the stories is it's through character.
Yeah.
It's through moments where we're learning while experiencing emotional storytelling. And that's exciting to me. That's why I read across the board. I read everything slowly, but I get it read. I'm not a fast reader, which is a point. But anyway, I get it read.
There you go. And also, I forgot to tell people earlier to leave your questions in the question box, please. And I see we already have a few questions that are coming in, and so I'll take those soon. And so please do keep leaving those questions. Another recurring theme in both of our books is race. The idea of racism, also dealing with race and class. I mean, those are the two big themes for me and The Kindest Lie. And I wanted to show the nuances of it in my story. I mean, my book is taking place in 2008, at the time that Obama is elected as president. And my main two characters have a Ivy League educated Black woman engineer, Ruth. And, so she's in a higher socioeconomic bracket now.
Yeah.
Not the environment she grew up in, which was, in a poor environment, but she's got a certain degree of money and affluence now. However, on her job, she's still not getting promoted, not getting the assignments that she believes she deserves. She's sitting on the L train with her husband when a white cop is hassling a Black boy, and she's sitting there rigid with fear because she knows what could happen. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've got this 11-year-old white boy, Midnight, who is poor. And, his father has lost his job at the plant. However, he's able to move through that world a lot more freely than his Black and brown friends. So there's all these nuances of race and class. And in your book, we talked earlier about it being set, in the Black Belt. And you would think in 1925, okay, Black people haven't really progressed very far in 1925. We're dealing with a lot of oppression. But I love how you talk about Dreamland, the Dreamland Café, offering a path to the good life. And so talk to me about race and class and the good life and rubbing shoulders with celebrities.
And what after stepping away from the process of writing the story, in touching upon race, first, race is a constant. That's just the environment that these characters exist in. But there are a couple of lines that come to mind because I remember hearing this when I lived in Chicago, where I knew people who lived on the south side of Chicago who'd never been to the north side. I know people like that. and had, so my main character in 1925, she has a moment where she's thinking about something, but she hesitates because she's never spoken to a white person before. So she's like, yeah, let me see. Is this the moment I think the line is to stretch that particular wing, or something. I don't know what I wrote. But and then there are a number of those moments, but I also touch upon colorism within our race, because some people may not have heard of this, but they're in the 20s and probably later. If someone wanted to hire you to be a chorus girl at an upper end nightclub, you had to pass the brown bag test.
Brown paper bag test.
Brown paper bag test. And that test was you needed to be lighter than the brown paper bag in order to be considered for the job. And so these were things that were accepted by those in the business, if you will, because those were just the rules of the business at that time. You didn't like it. You didn't care for it. But nonetheless, you dealt with it.
You dealt with it. No, I love that. Speaking of colorism, so like in my book, like, we're talking about in your book, you talk about that. I've got a piece in there, Obama's just been elected president, and I have a couple of my characters have a conversation about the skin tone of Michelle Obama and how they're, they're happy. We're celebrating that you don't have to look twice at her to know she's a Black woman, and so it meant something that she was a dark-skinned Black woman, because of the history of colorism and what that means, and who men sometimes choose, and how sometimes they're choosing these white European standards of beauty. And so that meant something, and it symbolized something for us.
It also separated, it put barriers within the race that people dealt with differently. Yeah. And the thing, up until, we could almost, you and I marked the spot when the actress who, her name is escaping me, dark-skinned actress, came to the forefront, and this is a weird way of saying it, popularized dark skin.
Dark skin.
Okay. Why did that?
Lupita?
Yes.
Is it Lupita? Yeah. And I can't pronounce her last name. But...
Yeah. So thank you. I'm in the chat room. Thank you.
Oh, they're saying Lupita too. Yeah, right.
Phonetically spelled. We're here.
Yes. Lupita, I mean, that beautiful chocolate skin and that made it okay. And no, that's very true. Also, secrets. You and I have written about secrets in our book.
Oh, yeah.
And, and this is going to be our last one before we get into the questions. I know we have to get into the questions in a few minutes, but in the Kindest Lie, I've got all kinds of people telling lies, keeping secrets, and they're doing it for the very. Usually, they're doing it either to protect themselves or to protect the people they love. How did you use secrets?
I got blown away by a question asked of an interviewer recently about how secrets played a part in my story. And I had to take it back to a personal level in that my family on my mother's side were driven by secrets. Information was like pulling teeth. And I always get this, and I was the nosy one. I was the one, even as a little girl, I was like, Mother, tell me something about this or that. And it turns out, because I can't tell all their secrets now, even though my mother is not passed away a while ago, but they got some good stuff. And I can tap in on it. And it becomes a way of, just as you pointed out, protecting, but also it has a certain amount. You keep a secret, you have power. You have power over other people because you know something they don't know. And you use that to get what you want.
Yes, there's a lot of power.
A lot of power. So I think that was more my rationale with the secrets in my book was it was a power play.
Yeah, and you will see it in families and the whole generational thing too. Secrets are kept over the years, It was
also a bargaining chip too.
Yes, that's very true. All right, I want to get to the questions. So we do have questions that have been coming in.
Yay.
I'm going to start with the top one. Let's see. Yeah, no one voted on them. So I think all the questions are equally wonderful. This first one is, since you both have published your debut novels in 2021, what was the biggest roadblock that you encountered during the process of getting published? And that comes from our friend Anissa, who is just such a loyal fan and follower of our work.
Oh, thank you, Anissa. That is an interesting question. Okay.
I want you to go first. Yeah.
Let me think. I have been blessed, I believe, with the opportunity to hang out with a group called the 2021 Debut Authors. Yay. A lot of the potential pitfalls, I swear, these men and women, with their candid conversations in our private Facebook group, helped me, navigate. Because I was one of the, I started out in the 2020 group because my book, the pandemic did change some dates for me. So that was a little challenging because you get ready to go and then you'd have to back up, get ready to go and had to back up and finally get ready to go and you're there. So I actually benefited from being in two debut groups that were some of the most professional. I used to run a company. These folks, volunteer time and what have you, were taking care of business and sharing so much that you just learned. So I avoided some pitfalls just because of these people.
Yeah, I would have to say the same thing. I'm in the same debut groups with Denny, the 2020 and the 2021. Yeah, you learn so many things that you wouldn't even think to ask, just the kinds of things about, whether it's your cover reveal or what to expect in the editorial process once you're working with your editor, to, how to find out, sales for your book, where to look, does book scan matter, and, just how to navigate.
I got to ask you about that.
I know, right? I mean, yeah. I hear, it doesn't give you total sales. So those kind of things, the questions to ask your editor about what are your sales and the breakdown and just so many things. I would say for me, the biggest, if I would, want to be honest about roadblocks, it was before I got my book deal. Getting an agent was a tough process for me. It took me close to 2 years to land an agent, and I queried too soon, and that happens to people. that you do it. But then after I got my agent, it was only 2.5 weeks to get the book deal. And it's been pretty smooth sailing since then. And I've gotten a lot of acclaim.
It's only 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it didn't take long. Yeah, so that was a good process for me. I think the only thing that I do that I need to stop doing, or kind of learning to stop, is reading and internalizing too many of the Goodreads reviews. And that's one of the things they tell you in the debut groups. Do not, whatever you do not read your Goodreads reviews, because one bad review can really take you psychologically. I remember calling you, Denny, after it wasn't a Goodreads review, but somebody did. Don't go Googling it, but there's a video out there.
It was.
I know somebody was out there with a video, and they were like, it was, very much criticizing some things in the book. And it was just a tough critique. And I didn't have a thick skin at the time I was reading it. And I remember calling you and like, oh my God, and I couldn't sleep for a couple of nights after that. So trying to separate yourself from that. And I heard Barack Obama talk about that in an interview recently. He doesn't have, not Goodreads, but he was just saying when they first, even though he's got them because he's an author, but he was talking about when he and Michelle first got into this game, and in that first campaign, he said they used to watch the news and all that. He said we had to stop because he said that's not about me. That was a caricature. That's about somebody else that they're talking about out there. And so you have to kind of separate yourself from it. And I learned that.
And I think that not that I necessarily have thick skin, but from being a dancer and back in the day for standing in line at auditions where everybody looked the same because you were cattle call. And so I need this height, I need this, blah, blah, blah. And you get a little tough about rejection that is, sometimes it's not based on anything except some other person's opinion, which is a valid opinion. And so my expectation is never that everyone's going to love every aspect of my book, and they have the right to make whatever comment they want, so long as they don't call me names like that, because then I'll weep. But I'm also a book critic. I write book reviews for NPR. Yeah. And part of doing that is I focus in on the story that I'm reading. It's not about the author. It's about what's on the page and how it's being delivered to me as a reader. And I have a lot of joy in writing reviews because I want to interpret through my review a story that 90% of the time I'm trying to encourage other people to read. So, sometimes there's some things in the story that I may not buy fully, and I let the reader know, but essentially I'm saying, worth your time. Yeah. Check it out. Make your own decisions on this particular story. So I'm comfortable, I guess. Oh, I'm seeing some. Hi, Janet.
People we know and everything. There's a question here from Della this time. She said, Nancy and Denny, both of you use dialogue in a wonderfully authentic way from different eras. Can you comment on that? I'll just briefly say that, for me with dialogue, I always thought it was like not my strength, but I keep getting comments that the dialogue really works and it's real and it's authentic. For me, I do a lot of, I'm curious, I'm nosy, I'll say like you. And I do a lot of eavesdropping. I do a lot of writing at Starbucks and other coffee shops. I sit and listen to people and I kind of study how they speak, the pattern of speech, that kind of thing. I just listen to people. And then also the journalism training. I've done television news. I did that for more than a decade. And so for me, it's always about writing for the ear. And I go back and I read my scene from the day before. And I listen to it, and it's like, how does that feel? How does it sound in my ear? And I can tell if there's a discordant note. I'm reading and I'm listening for that flow, that cadence, the rhythm. So that's how I approach it. What about you? Because you are in a different decade, like at least mine is more contemporary.
And that's when I went back to research. And also, I do have an ear for voices. I was a bad actress, literally not a good actress. But I have done a lot of, I was a media spokesperson for a major corporation in Chicago back in the day. I won't say the name. And so as a media spokesperson, I had to be interviewed, and I had to listen to myself when I was on the news talking about, a factory being closed or whatever. But for this particular story, one of the things that I wanted to be very authentic with were the sounds. And that meant the voices, that meant the background sounds, the music and everything. So I listened to a lot of jazz. I listened to a lot of blues singers from the 1920s, because there are albums out there where I can listen to Bessie Smith, Ida Cox. I also worked in a place in Chicago that is now no longer there, called the Wise Fools Pub. And that particular blues jazz joint had all of the old stars, Muddy Waters, and just people that at the time, I wish I'd been a little bit smarter back in the day, so I could have taken better notes. But in addition to listening to the sounds of the music, I paid attention to the lyrics, because the lyrics of those blues songs, those women and what they were writing, told a lot about where their thought process was. And it wasn't really always about, woe is me. There was a lot of other things going on. So I tried to get the cadence through that.
Yep. No, very good. And we have Della, I think, said she went to Wise Fools. So.
Oh, yeah. I won't talk about it no more.
Okay. Y'all have to spill the tea. But anyway, okay, so Janet asked, Denny, where have you found your most useful and interesting research for the historical aspects of your novel?
I'd say it was the Chicago Defender archives and working with an archivist at the Harold Washington Library. I hate to say I don't remember her name right now, but she was amazing. She also introduced me to a collection by Miriam. I can't, names are escaping me, but she, this woman had started a collection. She was the first Black librarian in the Chicago library system back in the 20s or 30s. And she just had an amazing collection of work. And going through that, this gal just was like the best guide to history. And knowing where to look is half the heart. Thank you, Miss Harsh, Vivian Harsh. It's a whole big facility gal, because at the time that I was doing this research, which took me like 6 years to write this book. So this is a few years back. And the library was temporarily located within, her collection was temporarily placed within the Harold Washington Library while they built that new facility. And I can't even remember the name. Yeah, I used to go to the Wise Fools Pub. Della, we can't talk about it.
Oh my gosh, I know. I love it. I'm going to talk to you more about this research thing later from
right.
What you did. I'm hoping we can squeeze one more in. Can we squeeze one more? The last question we had, I think. Was it the last? Yeah. The one about, okay, so were you influenced by Jesmyn Ward's masterful book, Sing Unburied Sing, when Sawyer Sister's Ghost Appears?
Actually not.
Okay. Great book,
one of the things that I shouldn't even say it this way, but I used to write fan fiction. And the fan fiction that I used to write was with a TV show called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And so me putting a ghost in a story is just me reaching back. No. There was definite purpose, but it wasn't, I was not inspired by that particular book. No, I was not.
Okay. Well, this has been absolutely tremendous. Wild Women in the Blues. If you don't have it, get a hold of it. It is tremendous. And
yeah, we have to do
we have to do a
Well, she's holding up mine. It's just important.
I know. We need somebody to like snap a photo of this, right? Like,
Right? Somebody take a
quick. I know. We're pretending.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. So Ariel, if she wants to rejoin us to close us out, Ariel. Thank you so much too to Women and Children First for hosting this tremendous event.
Oh my goodness! I'm looking at the chat again. Just thank all of you all. Your comments are fantastic. This is just. I love doing these events. I love. I wish I could see your faces, but you know.
I know.
We have more events coming up. Maybe we can give that a try later on.
Yeah, I mean, this was absolutely incredible. I really loved hearing you all talk, and I loved seeing all the research that you put into it. On it, like I think especially people don't realize how great Chicago's archives are. Like we have an incredible archive. So, and I mean, honestly, if you haven't read the book, you should read the book. You should read both books. The Kindest Lie and Wild Women in the Blues are being sold at Women and Children First. You can, again, either come in store 12 to 6, Tuesday through Sunday, or you can hit the little green button underneath to buy the book. And again, thank you so much for this awesome conversation. I really did enjoy sitting and listening. That was great.
Well, thank you to Women and Children First Bookstore for hosting us, and it's definitely a pleasure. This is, I wish I was traveling and in Chicago, but that'll happen soon because Nancy and I will be hanging out one day in the fall, and then we'll come by and visit with you.
Yes, we will definitely do that. You'll be doing your research. I'll be doing mine, and we can just.
Oh gosh, yeah, we have other books to
We do have other books coming. I guess we didn't talk about our other books, but I know we've got 1 minute left. You've got plenty of books coming. Denny, do you want to just give a little plug before we?
I have books. I'm going to be doing another historical fiction set in 1928 and in mostly in Los Angeles in 1928, Hollywood, and sort of centered around a movie called Hallelujah, which was the first Hollywood all-Black cast film produced by a white director named King Vidor. And then it's the dual storyline is 1968, the summer of 1968, and they're connected in a lovely way. And then I have other books coming. I'll be working on a biographical fiction later this summer that is based on an African princess who was gifted to Queen Victoria. So it's my first biographical fiction that I'll be working on.
Very nice. And then I've sold my second book to William Morrow, HarperCollins. It's called People of Means, and it's dual timeline set in 1960 Nashville and in 1992 in Chicago. And so it's a story of two women, two affluent Black women, mother and daughter, both of them coming of age at different national moments of racial reckoning. So it's about love, identity, purpose, and how both of them view resistance. So look for that coming in 2023.
What's the name of that again?
People of Means.
Oh, I love that.
I know. Yeah, People of Means. Kind of going with Ariel's whole thing about, these beautiful Black women all in glasses. Yes, you're all people of means. Yes.
That's it. There you go.
That's it. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's been great.
Thank you. Y'all have a great evening. So, thank you.
Bye-bye.